So let's have a look at some top challenges that I see we are faced with today in testing. The first one is the challenge to ban the use of the words best practice. And I would challenge everyone in here to go into the expo area and look for any vendors that pronounce best practice. The bookstall, there's books out there that says best practice. Says who? Says the author, obviously. Now let's have a look at this. Let's dissect these words. Best, the highest quality, excellent, standing, absolute qualifier, context independent. And it's a bit like, have you ever, when you were at school, when you were really young, you say, can I be your best friend? And they say no. And you say, I'll give you some sweets if I can be your best friend. And they go, okay. And so suddenly you're their best friend until somebody else comes along and they give more sweets and they're their best friend. But what does best friend mean? What does best mean? Highest qualifier. Now let's look at practice. Habitual or customary performance, okay? Practicing things. So therefore, best practice is the highest quality of habitual performance with no context. Let's challenge these people that pronounce best practice. And why is it we actively promote this in any life cycle? I've heard it in Agile, traditional, V model, W model, Scrum. This is best practice. Says who? Now let me explain why I believe this is very, very dangerous. This is vital for you to understand. Has anybody here heard of the Dreyfus model? Anybody? 1, 2, 3. Okay. Now, let me read this out. There's some things I can remember, some things I can't. And I want to read this out because it's important to understand the context here. In 1970s, the brothers Dreyfus, Herbert and Stewart, began their seminal research into how people can attain and master skills. The Dreyfus brothers looked at high-skilled practitioners, including commercial airline pilots and world-class chess masters. Their research showed quite a bit of change as you move from novice to expert. You don't just know more or gain skills. Instead, you experience fundamental differences in how you perceive the world. You approach problem solving and mental models you form and use. Unlike other models of assessments that rate the whole person, the Dreyfus model is applicable per skill. In other words, it's situational, not talent. Very important that. You are neither expert nor novice at all things. Rather, there are different degrees and stages. You can be a novice cook, but an expert skydiver. Now, why is this important to us when it comes to best practice? Now, they use this in the nursing profession, certainly in the UK. There's the book, From Novice to Expert. Now, in the book, they describe 5 stages. There's what's called the novice, and I'm going to explain this a little bit more. And the novice needs practices. Let's imagine test plans. You have a novice tester. They need the standards for test plans in order to produce test plans. That's what they need. They don't know how to do it. The next one is they call advanced beginners. They use practices. Okay, they've been using test plans for a while, but they still use the test plan standards. They still go back to those standards. The competent people, these define practices. These are the people that write the standards in your organizations for test plans. Then there's 2 more stages. There's the proficient that falls back occasionally on practices, and there's the expert that subverts practices. They actually challenge the practices that exist in your organization. Now, most people in an organization will stop at the competent. So you end up with people that are just constantly defining practices. They never move into the proficient or the expert. And these people, the proficient, they're contextually aware. That's what the Dreyfus brothers actually looked at. They're aware of things around them. And they'll be saying, actually, on this project, we don't need a test plan. Because. And the expert, the behavior comes from instinct. Now, airline pilots, look at airline pilots. They don't get into their aircraft and they have a manual to see how they fly the aircraft. And when they have rough weather, they don't say, oh, let's look at what rough weather we need to do. It's behavior from instinct. These people use instinct. And if we want people in our organizations to move into the proficient and the expert, if we want people like the Jedi testers that James Whitaker was talking about yesterday, we need to actually encourage creativity, not stifle it. So what does this mean? Oh, there's a book by Andy Hunt. If you want to learn more about this, Refactoring Your Wetware, I don't know if it's on the bookstore, but it's an excellent book that goes into the Dreyfus model within IT and looks at some of these people aspects. So how can this help and how can this hinder when we use phrases like best practice? How can this really upset us in organizations? Well, best practices are useful for people like the novice, the advanced beginners, and it gives jobs for the competent because they write them. But when it comes to experts and proficient, these are the people that use creativity. They actually get stifled with practices of any description because they want to use their instinct. Now, do you know who that guy is? Yeah? Gordon Ramsay. Let me give you a for instance. How many people in this room actually produce detailed scripts to run? Detailed test scripts to run. Okay. Let me give you an example of this. I want to bake a cake, okay? And I'm a novice or an advanced beginner. I don't really know how to do it. So what do I use? I will use a recipe. I want to bake a chocolate cake. I will get the recipe and I will follow the recipe. That's exactly what your scripts are, your detailed scripts. Now, imagine I go to Gordon Ramsay, who's an expert chef. And I say, Gordon, can you make me a chocolate cake? And he says, absolutely. And I say to him, and here's the recipe I want you to follow. I think he would use the F word quite a bit. You see, these proficient and expert people in our organizations, they need creativity. And best practices will stifle that, and if you're not careful, those people will leave. So that's my first suggestion. When you go out of here, if you see books, challenge the authors. Why have you used best practice? Who says it best? You know, do you want to be better than other people? Is that why you use it? Go to the vendors. If they talk about best practice, challenge that. Managers, stop it. Stop using best practice in your organizations. Testers, actually challenge your managers. So that's my first challenge.